Hello and welcome. My name is Xander. Welcome to the Django 4.x ORM Mastery Course YouTube edition. This tutorial is part of a playlist of tutorials related to the Django ORM. You can find the playlist link in the video description. If you would like to follow along step by step or just see the code related to this tutorial, then please utilize the links in the video description, which will take you to the code base that we utilized in this tutorial, as well as a setup guide for anyone who's new to Django, because we start from a base project here in this tutorial. So I take you through the process of getting that ready so that you can follow along in this tutorial. Just before we start the tutorial, if you do like this tutorial and you would like a complete structured learning experience, then please check out our Udemy course related to the Django ORM. You will find a link to the course in the video description. In the Django framework, we access and manage the data in our database through Python objects, referred to as models. In this tutorial, we learn about the Django model and how that relates to the database table. We work through a small exercise where we go ahead and build a Django model or multiple Django models, which include multiple fields. Once we finish describing our new tables, we then go ahead and actually apply that to the database, therefore building the tables in the database. This is a process known as migrations. So the final step of this tutorial, we migrate and then inspect the new tables in our database. If you would like to follow step by step, don't forget to check out the setup guides and the start of this section. That will take you to this exact point here, and we can go ahead and start from this point. We start with a representation of what it is we're trying to achieve. Our Django project is connected to a database. Currently, in a new Django project, that database is not populated. It doesn't have any tables. Tables is where we store the data. A single Django model is, in object-oriented programming terms, a class. Our class, aka Django model, represents a table stored in the database. What we aim to achieve here in this tutorial is to create multiple Django models, classes, which can then be translated through the Django ORM into actual tables that are created in our database. So we're going to go ahead in our Django models file. We're going to create some new models. One of them will be product. And the idea then is to go through the migration process of telling Django we now want to apply this model in our database to create our new table in our database. We will go ahead and create multiple tables. So let's go ahead and create for example, a brand table. So we then go ahead and create a new class, a new model in our models file. And then we go ahead and run the migrations. And then that will then be converted in our database into a new table called brand. Models are usually defined in the application's model.py file. Inside of our code project here, our code base, sorry. Inside of our code base here, we have the main Django project called core, and then we have the Django application here called inventory. So inside of this application, you can see that Django automatically creates a model.py file. From within here, we can go ahead and start to define some models. You might find that in the documentation, in the code base, sorry, that you download, you can see that we already have some models already defined. By all means, just remove those, or you can utilize those. Those are just for reference in case you didn't want to type out the code in this tutorial. So we saw there in the code that in actual fact, we can create an arbitrary number of models. Django does the hard lifting of converting our models into database tables and translating all of our interactions with the database thereafter. So let's go ahead and define a new model. We create new models as subclasses of the Django DB models.model. Now, don't worry if you're new to object-oriented programming. At this stage, let's start to familiarize ourselves with the patterns of code that we're creating so that you can replicate it to build your own tables. Although understanding object-oriented programming would be useful, it isn't mandatory. And you can work with Django at a comfortable level without understanding underlying object-oriented principles. So, like I said, let's just focus on the patterns at this point if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming. So if you remember, I said that the model is just a class. So here we use the class keyword, object-oriented Python principles, class, and then we define a class name. Now, the general principles of defining class names is that we need a capital at the start of a name. So we're going to create a product table. So let's call this product. And now we need to inherit or extend from models.model. So models.model, there we go. And we need the semicolon. And now we can go ahead and start to define some of the fields. So within our Django model, we describe the fields, field types, and other behaviors related to our data. Now, these are all topics that we explore in preceding tutorials, so we won't go into too much depth here. Like we can have an arbitrary amount of tables or models, we can also have an arbitrary number of fields. So each field that we assign in our model here, we assign to what is known as a data type. This defines the type of data that we intend to store within this field. So let's go ahead and build our first field. So for this, we need a field name, ideally lowercase. So let's call this name. If we do use, or if we require two names, or there's more than one word, sorry, then we utilize an underscore for that. Now, let's go for name. So name equals, and now we need to define the type of data that we want to store in this field in our table here. So for that, we are going to extend models, and now we're going to define the type of data we want to store. Now, probably one of the most common type of data that we're going to store is a string. So let's go for the char field. Again, there's more on the different types of fields later in this section of the course. Okay, so here we've defined char field. This is a string field for small to large size strings. It's worth noting that if you did want to store a large amount of text, then this wouldn't be the preferred data type to utilize. You could potentially then consider utilizing a text field, and that's utilized for a large amount of text. So in addition to defining the type of data, you will find that there are sometimes additional arguments that need to be passed in here. So for example, here with the character field, we can define the max length. So this is a restraint that we can place on this field, which defines the maximum length, the maximum amount of characters that we can store within this field. So let's just set this to 100, for example. So 100 here is referring to the maximum amount of characters that we can store within this field. So what we've done there, well, we've created a new model called product, and then we've defined a new field. So how that's going to be translated when we migrate this to the database and create the product table is that now within the product table, we are going to create a new field inside the product table called name. So let's go ahead and perform the same operation. I'm just going to copy and paste this down. I'm going to create a new model called brand, and then we're going to use the same field for brand. So now what we have is a new field in brand, which is a character field again. So in the brand table, when we migrate this and actually create the tables, we're now going to have a brand table and also a field in the brand table name. Let's just finish this off actually. Let's create a separate field here so you can see multiple fields. Quantity. Now, it's not normally good practice to abbreviate using abbreviations for names, but I'm going to do that in this instance just for this demonstration. So quantity equals models, and we're going to need a data type for this. So quantity, that's going to be a number. So here I'm going to be utilizing integer field, for example, and then yeah, there we go. So I'm going to create an integer field here. So a whole number, which I'm going to store a value about the quantity of product that I have available. So here in this model, I'm going to have two fields in the database table. And then one of them is going to be name, one of them is going to be quantity, quantity being a value, and the name being a string. So here we're going to have quantity, and that's going to be an integer. So our product table is going to now have a new field called quantity. The final step, once we've finished creating our models, is to migrate it, to actually apply these changes to the database. This is a subject which we will talk about in more detail later in this course, but let's just go through the process. First step, let's type in Python 3 manage.py make migrations. We run that, and you can see here that we have an error. Okay, so from .models, import product, blah, blah, blah. So you can see we've got an error here, and it tells us exactly where this error is. Product inventory models.py. So it looks like in the admin file here, there seems to be some references to models that don't exist. Now, if you remember at the start of this tutorial, we deleted some of these models, and that had reference elsewhere in our application. So what we need to do first is just remove this. I'm just going to highlight that out for now. So I pressed on Mac Command and /. If you're on Windows, I can't remember the shortcut, but you'll find that you can toggle the line comment. Okay, that's my shortcut there. On Windows, it's going to be slightly different. Okay, so let's take that out and of admin there. Let's go back to our models. I'm just going to clear that. Let's try this again. And this time you can see that we run the migrations and it was successful. So we can see the outcome of us completing the make migrations is that we've generated a new file. So if you go to migrations and then have a look at this new file, in here it describes the actions that are going to be performed to actually apply or to convert our model here into tables in our database. At this point, when we've run the make migrations command, we haven't actually applied or changed the database. We've simply just prepared and ready to actually make the changes to the database. If you read through the code, it's fairly self-explanatory. Here we have our brand table. We're going to be creating a new table, and these are the fields that are going to be created. Now, you might be wondering where this ID field came from. When we discuss primary keys in this section of the course, we will discuss that in a little bit more detail, but Django adds that automatically for us, a primary key, because we didn't define one ourselves in our models. So we can see here all the attributes and the fields that we've described in our models. So name, and then the max length, for example, has been applied for brand, and also the product field name. And also you can see we've created the quantity field here, and that's going to be an integer field. Okay, so now we've done that, we can now go ahead and run Python 3 manage.py and use the migrate command. The migrate command is the command that's actually going to take this file here, or this information, and actually apply these changes to the database. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got a bunch of information there, and it looks like everything was okay. And now you can see by going into our database, at this point, you are going to need the extension, the MySQL extension, if you haven't installed that. So the SQLite extension in Visual Studio Code here. So just go ahead and install that. That will then give you access to be able to see the database. So right click, open database. I can then go ahead and explore the database now. Now, a whole bunch of tables have been created, but let's just focus in on the tables that we created. That was from the inventory application. So you can see that Django has named the table inventory. That was the name of our application, and then the class name that we've defined. And it's all lowercase too. So let's have a look in the products table. You can see that there are 3 fields. 1 has been generated by Django, and 2 we've defined from our model. And that should be very similar to the brand table where we defined the name field. So you can see that our table has been created. We can go a step further and inspect the data inside of it, but of course at this point we don't have any data in our database.